everybody, and welcome to Shift F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, as always, we have Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
Top of the morning to you, Drew. I'm the Irish one. For those of you who are new to this podcast, it should be quite easy to understand which one that is, because it's the one with the Irish accent who really doesn't know very much at all.
Also joining us, as always, we have Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Pretty good. I'm the one who knows less than he thinks he does.
Great. Well, welcome everyone to, it's a different episode than our other stuff. This is the annual pre-season primer episode. You'll note that the runtime is probably double what our normal episode length is, because this is where we explain how Formula One works, who everybody is, and how to have fun watching it, all while assuming that you, the listener, have no prior knowledge of the sport or indeed any kind of motorsport. So if you are new to F1, maybe you've watched some of Netflix's Drive to Survive, you have come to the right place. And even if you aren't new to F1, stick around because we're going to cover everything and everyone that is new this season.
Absolutely. And if you don't know what sports are or what cars are, you can listen to our preseason primer, which went up last week.
So a little bit about, I guess, the normal show. We sort of see this podcast as a sort of a companion piece to the Formula One season. So we post an episode every week on Wednesdays, talk about the news of the racing world, what to expect from the upcoming race, and if a race has just happened, what happened in that race, and then why, because there's always incidents to unpack and armchair quarterback. We also take listener questions at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. And of course, you can support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to ad-free episodes, our Discord channel, and the ever-expanding back catalog of patron-exclusive episodes that cover racing documentaries like Senna and Michael Fassbender's Road to Le Mans, which we just wrapped up. Primers for other racing series like Formula E and IndyCar, if you decide that, oh my God, I love all motorsports, as can happen.
Yes.
And also car-related films like Days of Thunder and The Fast and the Furious. So if you would like to get access to all that fun stuff and just support the show, you can do so over at patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. Get used to hearing that.
We broke down the racing action in the movie Cars, just so you know. Like,
that's true.
We will, if it's car related, not even race related. Well, racing's in cars, but the point is, like, with every passing season, we're finding more ways to define something as a car movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even if the movie is mostly about launching an orbital cannon to destroy Funky Boy, we'll still manage to get it in there.
Very true. So just a quick note before we dive in, this is going to be a lot of info. So don't worry about remembering all of it. Just kind of let it wash over you. You'll pick up what you pick up. Watching races, I think, is really what helps it all come together, because you'll see things and go, oh, that's the thing they mentioned in the primer. And you can always listen to this again if you really want to and give us more ad bucks. Hint, hint. All right. So to kick it off, Formula One is the world's fastest, arguably the most prestigious, and certainly the most watched motor racing championship. It's been around since 1950, and it works like a lot of other sports. There are teams that compete at events over the course of a season, and at the end of the season, a champion is crowned. So to break that down, there are 10 teams with 2 cars each, meaning that there are 20 cars in every race. And this year, there are 24 races, each at a different track, across 21 different countries. And we're going to get to exactly where each one of those is at later in the episode. The season takes place from March through December, and both teams and drivers earn points for how they finish in the race. The driver and the team with the most points at the end of the season wins the championship. And there are actually 2 championships, one for the drivers and one for the teams, which is called the Constructors' Championship. Teams' points are made up of their drivers' points, which usually means that the winner of the Drivers' Championship is usually on the team that wins the Constructors' Championship, but not always. But really all anyone cares about is the Drivers' Championship. We want to see our gladiators do battle. That's kind of what we're all watching for.
Yeah, the Constructors feels like it's predominantly to do with prize money at this stage.
Yes, the teams certainly care about the Constructors' Championship because how they finish has a direct effect on the prize money they get. So the higher you finish, the more money you get. Money is at the heart of a lot of sports. It is no different than Formula One. And this sort of feedback loop tends to keep the top teams at the top, which makes it all the more exciting. See, this is when we put our spin on. When another team does well. So I remember having the revelation when I was getting into F1 that it can be really exciting to see someone come in third place because they're an underdog. And I mentioned that to illustrate that the more that you know about the team's capabilities, the more exciting it can be when you watch them exceed those capabilities. So that's another thing that we're trying to do with the show is to give sort of context to all this.
Yeah, it's not all about who wins. There's often, sometimes it's thrilling just to see somebody get into the points for the very first time. And when we do the rundown of teams and drivers later, hopefully that'll give you a bit of insight into sort of where everyone generally finishes.
Yeah, and this may prove especially important for this season because last year one team was extremely dominant. And if you don't have a sense of the other storylines that are going on outside of who wins, it can be a little boring. So that's what we're trying to do here. But back to the money, drivers technically don't earn any prize money from Formula One itself, but they do receive bonuses from their teams based on how they finish in the championship. The bonuses are defined by their contracts, so they aren't publicized, but many F1 drivers are very well paid. So, for example, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen were 21st and 22nd on last year's Forbes highest list, a list of the highest paid athletes at $65 and $64 million, respectively, ahead of Klay Thompson and Patrick Mahomes.
There you go.
F1 is trying to curb this feedback loop with a spending cap. So each team is required to spend no more than $135 million per season.
God.
Yeah.
How can they afford
just
anything?
try to limit it, you guys.
Oh.
One team did breach that cap in 2021 and was penalized with a fine and a reduction in the amount of wind tunnel time that they can use to develop the next season's car.
Can I just say, if you're new to Formula One, that is maybe the most, the biggest signal as to the sport you're about to get into. They broke the rules and they were penalized by having less wind tunnel time.
Yeah, let me tell you about computational fluid dynamics. Limit the number of NVIDIA graphics cards.
Exactly.
You
have to run it you're not allowed to overclock your CFD machines for the next week.
Total Wolf was found folding at home and was executed. It was really shocking last year.
Oh my God.
During the mid-season break, wasn't it? Shocking.
Yeah.
Driver salaries are excluded from the cap. But there's also just this matter of institutional knowledge, et cetera. So it remains to be seen just how effective the spending cap is. This is the second year, I think, at 135 million. So we're still sort of seeing if that does play out. But I think most would agree it's a step in the right direction.
Is it always drivers, or is it just the top two highest paid people, and it just always happens to be drivers?
Oh, good point.
It looks like drivers are exempt, and then you get 3 staffers.
Oh, okay.
That are exempt.
All right.
So each team is allowed to have, and that seems to correlate with the aero, engine, and mechanical.
Right.
Your 3 lead
CTO,
departments, the people who have the special sauce locked in their heads. That market is open,
and those people are very important. The drivers are merely the most visible. So speaking of visibility, what is going to happen when you sit down and actually watch a race? First of all, you'll hear a lot about the race weekend. So in addition to the race, there are actually a number of other events that happen. So first, we've got the practice sessions. Usually it's 2 on Friday and 1 on Saturday that last about an hour each. And this is, since the cars change every year, teams update them, and the track conditions are never consistent from race to race, it's important for the teams to send their cars around and dial in their setups by making all kinds of adjustments to aerodynamic elements and brake bias and all that stuff. Most of that is invisible since the teams tend to play their cards pretty close to their chests in practice, but you usually get a sense broadly about how a team might do based on their practice performance. This is especially true in preseason testing as well. The next event is qualifying, which is kind of a misnomer. You can't really fail to qualify in the modern era of Formula One. It's more about determining the order that the cars will start the race. So qualifying takes place on Saturday after the third practice session and is divided itself into 3 sessions that are each about 15 minutes long. So in the first session, which we call Q1, all 20 cars go out on track and try to set the best lap time that they can. They're not really racing. They're all just kind of doing a time trial simultaneously. And at the end of the session, the slowest 5 cars are eliminated. And those are the cars that start at the back of the grid in positions 20 to 16. Q2, the remaining 15 cars go again, and again, the slowest 5 are knocked out. And then in Q3, you've got 10 cars left, and again, their best times in that session determine their starting order. So the fastest car in the Q3 session starts the race in the front, which we call pole position. It is important to know that it's how you do in each session that determines your starting place, not your overall best time. So for example, rain could show up in Q3 and make everybody slower than the cars that got knocked out in Q2.
Right.
But those in Q3 would still start in the top 10. It's also important to know that despite being basically a time trial, it's actually pretty fun to watch. The sort of knockout, the ticking of the clock nature really adds to the drama, and you get some pretty amazing moments, especially if rain shows up, which tends to throw everybody's plans into disarray. But most importantly for me, it's the first chapter in the story of the race weekend. I sort of feel incomplete if I don't watch qualifying and just turn on the race, because then you're like, well, how did that guy, start in third?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it feels like almost like not watching the semifinal before the final, because so much of what's going to happen during the race is going to be influenced by where people are starting, and that's because it's not just the fastest car that wins. You have to overtake people in this sport, and if you are, a car that has a tricky time on a certain type of track getting overtakes done, then maybe qualifying is more important for you. So it's all those storylines that sort of emerge throughout that race weekend.
Now, as you become more of an F1 sicko, and there are some people who do live by this, what Drew just said about qualifying, there are people who are like, you're really not getting the full race weekend unless you watch practice. I haven't gone that far because for the most part, practice tends not to be that eventful, and like you get a lot of good commentary during it, and there's catch up on hot goss, but it's not necessarily the most riveting thing to watch, and a lot of people tend not to watch it, which is a problem for Formula One, or at least Formula One feels it's a problem and would really like it if instead of there being events on 2 days with a thing that people feel passionate about watching, what if you had 3 days of just must-see racing action? Hence, a different weekend format that F1 has been trying to figure out. That's
right. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to go over the race itself. The race. The races are on Sunday and last a maximum of 2 hours, during which they drive nearly 200 miles. The number of laps varies because each circuit is a different length. They all feature at least one pit stop, sometimes multiple. It's up to the teams, really, how they want to play it. Rob will get to strategy and tires, which affect the pit stops. At the end, the drivers are awarded points that contribute to their championship standings. And crucially, only the top 10 finishers in the race are awarded points, with first place getting 25, second place gets 18, kind of steps down all the way to 10th place, which gets 1 point. It is pretty brutal if you finish outside the top 10 and get 0 points, having done an entire race weekend. But that is just one of the many stories you as a viewer are following. Because like you said, Danny, sometimes it is a huge achievement if an underdog driver or team gets a single championship point.
Yeah, because they're fighting the teams around them, and that might be just the 2 points they needed to get 7th in the championship and then get millions more at the end of the season.
Very true. So now that we've thrown all of that at you, like Rob said, there is one more kind of confusing event that only shows up occasionally. So there are 6 sprint events scheduled for this year. And the sprint is basically a short race. It's 1/3 the distance of the normal race. There are no pit stops. And the top 8 finishers in the sprint earn points. So it's 8 for first place down to 1 for 8. On race weekends where there is a sprint, we get 1 practice session on Friday, followed by sprint-specific qualifying, which they call the shootout. It works like regular qualifying, but the sessions are a bit shorter. On Saturday, the sprint itself happens. Then we get regular qualifying for the race. And then the race is on Sunday as usual.
And that is a change from last year. So even
Yes.
even smaller rules like this get tweaked on an annual basis.
That's right. It's only been around for like 5 years or so, and it's still a little divisive. Like you said, F1 basically introduced them so that they could sell more tickets and TV time. Sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're not. It used to be that how you finished in the sprint affected the race. It no longer it's siloed off now, and you get points. I don't know if maybe all you have time for is to watch the race. Sometimes they're great. Yeah, leave it up to you.
It's an extra short little weird race.
Yeah.
You can decide to watch or not. And there's
Yeah.
only 6 of them. This year it's going to be China, Miami, Austria, USA, Brazil, and Qatar.
Which USA?
Oh, Kota. Austin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Austin. Okay. All right. So, like I said, there are 2 drivers per team, and teammates in F1 are a little weird. They do sometimes work together. So, for instance, the car behind may be ordered to defend against another attacking team, but that's only if the driver listens to the team's orders.
Multi-21.
It mostly happens.
Multi-21.
Yeah. There were some infamous occasions where they did not. Every driver out there thinks they are the best, and they especially want to beat their teammates because they're the only ones with the same machinery. It's a pretty poor reflection on your ability if your teammate beats you every time in the same car. But before we get to those teams and their drivers, a quick note about how to tell them apart on track. Each team has a different paint job, which we call a livery, but the cars within the same team look practically identical. So that the major difference between each car on the same team is the color of their camera pod, sometimes called a T-bar, because it looks like a little squat letter T that sits on top of the car just behind the driver's head. So one driver will have a black T-bar, while another one will have a fluorescent yellow one. Typically, it's the more senior driver that has the black one, but that's not always the case. So be on the lookout on the Shift+F1 social accounts for our spotter's guide as we get closer to the first race.
The only other way of telling them apart is the color and style of their helmets, but the drivers change their helmets every race. So it's kind of a tricky one to keep your eyes on a weekend by weekend basis. Yeah,
it's also kind of obscured by the halo, the kind of protective barrier around them too. And then one note about engines that can be a little confusing. A lot of the teams have names that you've heard of, like Mercedes and Ferrari, like those are F1 teams. But in addition to being teams, they also make their own engines and then sell those engines to other smaller teams, which we call customer teams. So with each team breakdown, we'll also mention the engine manufacturer because it's important to know. All right, but before we get to all the teams and drivers, let's take a quick commercial break. And now we're back. Let's get to the teams and drivers. Kick it off, Danny O'Dwyer.
Commercial breaks, I feel like, are also on theme with this.
They
sport.
really are. It's like
Especially
plastering our the side pods of this podcast with logos of crypto companies,
petrochemical companies.
Although I think we deselected those in the ad tools.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I think neither of those will come up. So maybe we're not very Formula One, after all. Yes, let's dive into the teams. We've broken these up between the three of us, and I have the honor of talking about Red Bull. Yes, that's right. The drinks company, what with the taurine, with the bull and the funny commercials. And they have all those weird soapbox derbies and people create, small planes and jump off of piers in weird European cities. Red Bull, it's a weird company. They make people go into balloons in space and jump out. And they also have a Formula One team. And you would think, with all of that excess and frivolity, that this would be a piss poor team that just sort of turns up, sells some cans of its weird elixir, and then disappears. But in fact, since their entrance into the sport, they have been rather dominant. They are currently enjoying their second sort of dynastic period within the sport, just having scooped up 3 drivers' championships in a row, and the constructors, very importantly, last year as well. Their car is very easy to see or to pick out because it kind of looks like one of their cans turned on its side with 4 wheels strapped to it and a front wing and a rear wing. It's got a big Red Bull on it. It's dark blue. The engine is made by Honda and Red Bull. It's what's the situation with them?
It's the Red Bull powertrains rebranding. It's still Honda making it. It's just that Honda wanted to exit the sport, and Red Bull was standing up their own engine development arm. But that takes years. We'll get to that in a bit. Engines are hard. So while Red Bull is spinning up their own engine designing operation, it's still Honda selling them. I think they slap a badge on it, but it's a Honda engine.
Yeah, and there is no Honda team, weirdly.
Yes.
This is the only engine that doesn't really have, it's not a full-time constructor.
Right. It's a team with a Japanese engine based in the UK, but they are originally from Austria. And in fact, they own one of the circuits that we're going to be racing on, the Red Bull Ring in Austria, previously known as the A1 Ring. It's a bit of an older track that they've done up in recent years. The team principal, who is effectively sort of like, I guess the role of this person changes a little bit team to team, but it's effectively the sort of head coach, the manager of the team.
The boss.
The boss, in some ways, the sort of owner of the team in some situations as well. The team principal for Red Bull is currently Christian Horner, who has been their team principal since the very start. He is currently embroiled in a rather, I guess, opaque issue within the company in terms of how he was treating a certain employee. There's an internal investigation going on. At the time of recording, we're not quite sure what's going on. They interviewed him last week. But if he was to leave the team, I don't know what the circumstances of that will be. I'm not making any judgment calls on that, but just in terms of F1, it would be a massive deal if Christian Horner was not the team principal of that team. He's sort of a mainstay of Red Bull. He is not, though, arguably their most important administrative officer. That probably goes to their chief technical officer, Adrian Newey, who is largely sort of understood to be the one of the best car designers, one of the best engineers in the sport, and he has managed to produce championship-winning cars for Red Bull for many, many years. Even when they weren't winning championships, they were usually second. So Newey is sort of their secret little weapon. There's some weird internal politics stuffing happening at Red Bull. Dietrich Mateschitz, who is the founder of the Red Bull company, he passed away in late 2022, and it sounds like there are some internal, power struggles going on between the parent company and the F1 team, which is arguably one of its biggest non-drink related wings. So I wonder if we'll see some of that sort of stuff play out this year as well behind the scenes. And a lot of F1 is about politics. Last year, they were first place in the Constructors' Championship, largely because of the success of their number one driver, undeniable number one driver, current drivers' champion, and champion for the past 3 years in a row, Max Verstappen. He is Dutch. He is racing royalty. His father, Jos, was an F1 driver, not nearly as successful, but he was in the sport for a while. Like I said, last year was his third championship. He's only 26 years old. And his style, I guess, is that of a confident young driver who's got his shoulders out. In years past, perhaps folks would say he was a bit more aggressive. In recent years, he hasn't needed to be aggressive, so perhaps that's part of it. He's a fantastic driver, regardless of whatever you think about his temperament. His skills are really, outstanding. If you hear other drivers talk about, especially his ex-teammates talk about just how in I guess close to the car he is in terms of being able to understand where its weight is and when it twitches. He's really a generational talent. And the real question is whether or not he and his longtime girlfriend, Kelly Piquet, will eventually tie the knot. It's been 3 years. He did steal her off of another driver. I'm not to reduce Kelly Piquet's agency in this regard, but I think that's the thing we're all, the championships are one thing, but I think it's about time he sort of put his money where his mouth is and put a ring on it. Sergio Perez doesn't have that problem. He's a happily married man with children. He is an older driver. He's 34 now. He is a Mexican driver, elder statesman. I don't know. He's been around. He's been at a lot of teams. Journeyman, that's the way to put it. And he largely was kind of on the way out of the sport at the end of the 2020 season, but had a terrific last couple of races right as Alexander Albon was having a bad set of races, and basically took over from him in 2021. Last year he placed second, although F1 fans will say that might have been a lot more to do with the car than his particular mentality or ability last year. It seems like he's losing a bit of an edge, which is something that's happened to a lot of Max Verstappen's teammates over the years as the car seems to sort of trend towards the way he likes to drive, which is, as I said previously, quite difficult for other drivers to pick up on. And that's Red Bull. They're probably the favorites going into 2024.
Yeah, I would say that Sergio Perez also, we keep a sharp eye on driver contracts, and he, like a lot of the rest of the drivers here, kind of coincidentally, his contract is up at the end of this year. It's kind of half the field.
14, I think we counted last week.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Nuts.
All right. So next up is Mercedes. They are, of course, a German team, though they're F1 based, like most actually F1 teams. Their HQ is in the UK. That's kind of the Silicon Valley of Formula One is in the UK. Until 2021, Mercedes had won the previous 7 drivers and constructors championships.
Yikes.
So they were the previous dynasty. Recently, they've had to take a backseat to Red Bull after they pursued a car design that really didn't pan out. So all eyes will be on them this year to see if they have turned it around. Their livery we haven't actually seen yet, but I can assume that it is either black or silver and teal.
Well, they're all black this year, Drew. So
it's true. There's so much carbon fiber out there. It's
the whole bit about here's how you can recognize which car and driver is which. I'm like, sorry, new F1 fans. They all collectively decided to screw you because paint has weight. True.
Yeah. They run their own engine, a Mercedes engine. Their team principal is a guy named Toto Wolff. If you needed a more menacing Germanic figure, there isn't one. Maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger. Toto Wolff is your team principal. They placed second last year. Their drivers are, number 1, Sir Lewis Hamilton. He is one of the all-time greats, having won 7 championships, tied only with Michael Schumacher. He has spent the last 11 seasons with Mercedes, and this will be his final one before he moves to Ferrari. That announcement came only a short while ago as of this recording and was pretty shocking considering his record with Mercedes and with Toto Wolff at the helm. So it will be pretty interesting to see how he fares this year. He is British. He's the only black driver in the sport. Last year he placed 3rd in the championship, and he is another of not the eldest, but one of them, an ancient 39 years old. His teammate is a young gun named George Russell. He's 26. This is Russell's 3rd year with Mercedes, and while some expected him to outshine the aging Hamilton, he made some pretty big errors last year that resulted in him coming a distant 8th in the Drivers' Championship to Hamilton's 3rd. In prior years, though, he had been very consistent and excelled in qualifying, especially. So we'll have to see if this year is more of a return to form. But speaking of Ferrari, Rob, tell us.
Yeah, it's the most storied team in Formula One. It has sort of the longest history in racing. For a number of years, Ferrari was considered such an integral part of the sport, and the thought of it leaving would be so devastating in the health of the sport that at the end of each season, they just received bags of cash from F1 just for being Ferrari. The historical franchise award, if memory serves, is what they called it. They finally got rid of that because other teams didn't think it was fair that Ferrari was pocketing $50 million for just being Ferrari. So now they're down there with the rest of them. Ferrari, traditionally, Ferrari, as what if you've seen the movie, this is not the movie's not making it up. Like, Ferrari starts out as a car manufacturer that is there to support the ambitions of an owner who likes to go racing. And so for a number of years, like, the Ferrari F1 team was kind of the, one of the lungs of the Ferrari, car manufacturing company in terms of the importance of its business. In recent years, that may have changed. They were spun off from Fiat Chrysler in 2016. They are the most ridiculously profitable manufacturer in the world. Other manufacturers, they pocket very small amounts from the sale of an individual car. Ferrari pockets tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes $100,000 from moving one car. They've got a wait list to buy a Ferrari stretching into next year. Wow. They recently appointed Fred Vasseur, a longtime captain of different racing teams, as their team principal. He is a sort of hard-nosed and very experienced operator, and it seems like he was sort of put there to right the ship, as it were, because Ferrari has been a team that has struggled off and on since the departure of Michael Schumacher and the sort of the legendary leadership that surrounded him. They've had good seasons since then. They have won championships since he left, but they've never returned to the glory days of the 90s and early 2000s. Their two drivers are Charles Leclerc, who is a Monegasque driver. Depending on which language he is speaking, he changes how he pronounces his name. He speaks French, English, and Italian. You sort of tapped as one of the most promising drivers in the sport a number of years ago. His stock, if it has slipped at all, has slipped very slightly. He's still regarded as one of the fastest and most talented drivers. He's had some atrocious luck at Ferrari, but his future there still seems pretty bright. They extended him recently to be partnered with Lewis Hamilton for whatever is the foreseeable future after Lewis Hamilton moves to that team. In that process, the person who got a little bit screwed was Carlos Sainz, a Spanish driver who placed 7th last year in the championship. He has been speaking of journeyman, he is a very good driver who has just moved around to a lot of places because, as good as he is, he's never been seen as the primary driver. He's never been seen as like, this guy is going to be the franchise. And so he gets moved around a lot.
Yeah, I will point out that we talk a lot about like the number one driver, primary driver. These aren't necessarily codified in the team's like running order, but it's sort of like a wink and a nod. A lot of the time, a lot of teams will mostly say like, we don't have a number one driver, but sometimes It's pretty apparent.
Yeah, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's close, but I mean, Ferrari next year will be an interesting situation when Hamilton goes there with Leclerc. But a lot of the time it's pretty assumed. If it's not seniority, then it's points.
Might get pretty interesting there this year, though. I'm curious if Sainz has to go into. He has a contract for this year. Yeah. Nobody knows where he's going after this. He does not currently have a ride for the next season. So I'm curious if he goes full Cobra Kai or whether he shows he's a good soldier and willing to do whatever it takes to help out the team that dumped him.
Well, one team that has a very obvious number one driver is our next one, McLaren, who have a beautiful orange car, or papaya, as they often refer to it as. It's one of the more noticeable cars on the grid. It has a Mercedes engine in it. They are based in the UK. They've been around since about the 60s, founded by actually a New Zealander, Bruce McLaren. And they're sort of an interesting team, lots of different partnerships over the years, pretty good, decent run in the 90s and early aughts as a Mercedes works team. when they made that transition. They've had a lot of great drivers over the years. But they sort of struggled in the modern era, especially when we started this podcast about 10 years ago at this stage, almost. They were sort of a well-regarded name who really weren't picking up many points, and that has shifted in the past few years. A large part of that has to do with a big rebuild that they've done there. CEO Zach Brown is a very familiar face around the grid, an American guy who's been the sort of helm of this organization for much of the past decade. Their team principal is Andrea Stella, who operates and takes care of most of the race weekend business. Last year, they placed fourth, which for them is pretty terrific, given the recent history. And they did so rather convincingly, mostly down to their number one driver, Lando Norris, who is a 24-year-old English. His nationality is UK, but I think like many of these drivers, he was like born in Brussels or something. They're all born all over the place, and where they grew up and what their nationality is sometimes somewhere else. Lots of international children. Last year he placed in sixth. He also sort of matured a lot last year. He was kind of like one of the young at heart drivers on the grid, especially during the COVID years. I think he was a fantastic representative for the sport for younger people, doing great like Twitch streams and getting involved in the esports side of stuff. But last year he cut a more mature figure, I think, and whether or not it had anything to do with his success, it seems at least that he's really knuckled down and found his form. His teammate Oscar Piastri, in many ways, reminds me of Lando Norris from a couple of years back. He's an Australian. Last year he placed ninth. He's 22 years old, like I said, and in an interesting position. I feel like nobody's expecting him to fight with Lando for the number one seat at McLaren, but much like Perez at Red Bull, I think they will want to see him keep up as much as possible with Lando this time around.
I think there's a chance that he does very well in this season, and then he's one I'm watching.
Okay,
for sure. Next up, Rob.
Yeah, the Aston Martin team, kind of an odd one here. So they are a Mercedes customer team. They are led by Mike Crack, who took over after the sort of surprise dismissal of their previous team principal, Otmar Safnauer. But he seems to have done a fine job. Like Aston Martin has become a more competitive team on his watch, but kind of gives off non-entity vibes, in part because the big wheel at Aston Martin is in fact a billionaire named Lawrence Stroll, who sort of had a reputation cultivated as a turnaround expert, but kind of guy who takes over companies and reworks their business and creates a lot of value from distressed assets and then flips them or runs them. And he appears to have started doing that with Aston Martin, which I'm not sure was always the plan, because he got into racing to support the ambitions of his son, Lance, a Canadian race car driver who, has flashes of being a totally decent driver. But if he were not a billionaire son who did not own a Formula One team, probably wouldn't have an F1 racing seat. But happily, he is blessed with a father who can buy an F1 team and let him be the driver for it. Last year, kind of an embarrassing season because with one of the better cars they've put together in years, he kind of sucked in it and was a non-factor in the championship points race. But again, Dad owns the company, but increasingly it also kind of feels like Dad is running the company because he's really into running an F1 team now. And so Lance is in the position that I think we've encountered from time to time with, sometimes a child develops an interest and then a parent just takes it over and maybe ruins it a little bit for their kid. Who can say? His teammate there is Fernando Alonso, one of the biggest names in the sport, one of the best characters in the sport. I believe the best description of him probably was one he gave of himself during Drive to Survive last year, where last year, the year before, where he says like, F1 needs a villain, and I guess it's me, or something like that. And that is the part that he's been willing to play time and again. He has cultivated a reputation, definitely deserved, but again, he exaggerates it, as just one of the smartest drivers there is. If you follow American football, Fernando Alonso has huge Aaron Rodgers energy in terms of just like the way he approaches the sport, emphasizes sort of the cunning and the strategic genius of it. Also a very, very good driver, and also a pathologically self-interested man, even by the standards of F1 drivers. He's at Aston Martin right now, but he has left chaos in his wake. He left the Alpine team sort of on a surprise basis to jump ship to Aston Martin. He jumped to McLaren right as that team fell off a cliff. He drove for Ferrari. He was at then he was at McLaren before that, and some people still say that he narked on them to F1 and caused McLaren to receive one of the stiffest penalties in the history of the sport, because he was just in a fit of pique and decided to burn the house down on the way out. So that's the driver lineup. The rich kid and the rich kid and the aging ace.
Yeah, 42 years old. He is the oldest driver and shows no sign of slowing down. 40, I think, has been like sort of the unofficial cap. People start looking around like, I don't know, but like he is still driving the wheels off.
He fights
He's
like
in
a
that Tom
lion.
Brady place. Like,
yeah,
off-season
for sure.
F1 news, they just start running stories that were obviously planted by PR people. Today, one of the stories that I saw was Fernando Alonso, after recent medical evaluations, pleasantly surprised, thinks he can drive till he's 50.
Well, speaking of Alpine, they are the next team to talk about here. Alpine is the extremely French team. It is spelled like Alpine, but Alpine is the racing brand for the French car company Renault, which is itself partly owned by the country of France. Their team principal is French. They run a Renault engine in their car, and both their drivers are French.
Oui.
Yeah.
Oui.
Their livery is blue and pink.
Like the tricolor. Very, very nice.
That's exactly, yes. Their team principal is Bruno Famine. He's relatively new. He started midway through the last season. Last year, this team placed 6th. Their drivers are Pierre Gasly. He has had one of the most tumultuous F1 careers, namely because it touched Formula One, or it touched Red Bull, which, if you're in the sport long enough, you learn that, boy, unless you're Max Verstappen, it sucks to be a Red Bull driver, because they will boot you out mid-season if you make so much as a single mistake. That happened to Pierre Gasly, but he has now landed at Alpine. He placed 11th last year. He's 28 years old. His teammate, Esteban Ocon, 27 years old, also from France, last year placed 12th. He's another one that has sort of bounced around. Ocon has sort of rubbed elbows with his teammates in some occasionally catastrophic ways. I don't know that we've seen that so much recently, but sometimes sparks can fly. So,
and these
Alpine's
guys are childhood best friends who hate each other.
It's true. It's true. I think over a girl.
They have not said. They have not said. They just alluded to things were done that will never be spoken of. So my assumption is it's a girl, for sure.
Okay.
I like to think it's that they were the two guys in that Ridley Scott movie about the two fencers during the French Civil War. What was that called again? The two lads who kept having fights over and over again.
The Duelists.
The Duelists.
Harvey
Sorry,
Keitel.
Yeah. They were the two guys in the Duelists. Yeah.
Oh, now they're driving cars.
That might qualify it, though, for a Patreon exclusive podcast. So we'll have to see about that. Next up is Williams, who are, we've been doing these teams in order of where they finished. And really, a couple of years ago, if you had said we were talking about Williams, not last, but fourth from the bottom, you would have said that is ridiculous, my friend Daniel. They are another storied British team based off of another driver, much like McLaren. In recent years, the family-run business of Williams was sort of, the influence of the family waned as the founder of the team passed away, and his daughter sort of had a tough run of running the team for a while there, and it was eventually bought by a venture capital firm, I guess it was, Dorrington Capital. But in more recent years, again, they have had much more. They're sort of properly righting the ship, and the person in the forefront of that is James Vowles, who is another storied engineer within the sport. He was at Mercedes for a long time. He is basically running the ship over there. He's team principal. He sort of gives off principal vibes. He's kind of, he's front and center a lot. He's talking. He's got his own little YouTube show, and he's trying to be out there basically explaining how they're fixing this team and how everything is going. They have a Mercedes engine in there as well. They placed 7th last year. Their two drivers are in very different positions, I would say. Alex Albon he flies under the Thai flag. I think he was technically born in the UK, but he has massive Thai heritage, of course. He placed 13th last year, and it was by far his best season. Alex is somebody a lot of people like. He's a very amicable guy, wears his heart on his sleeve. I would say he's probably one of the more vulnerable, sort of, or at least emotionally sort of authentic or transparent driver. And he had a tough go of it, like many did at Red Bull, and people feared that he may have been sort of spoiled in a way, like he might have been run ragged there, and we'd never get a good driver out of him. He's done fantastic last year. He's 27, so he's no spring chicken for the sport these days. When you start hitting 30, you really want to make sure you're worth your paycheck, or they're going to try and bring a young gun in there. But he is on the ascendancy, and as we're looking at the sort of the lemon dance that's going to happen later this year, when we start to, everyone starts to look at who they're going to pick up for 2025, Albon is one of those drivers that folks are saying may be in line for that opening up Mercedes seat. His teammate Logan Sargent has had a tougher go of it. He's an American driver. He placed 21st last year, which is lower than Liam Lawson, who lost his seat at what are we calling that team again? Or what were they last year?
They were AlphaTauri.
Last year they were AlphaTauri.
Still AlphaTauri. Okay, great. They were in Toro Rosso. They were AlphaTauri, and then next year they're called something ridiculous.
I'll get to that.
We'll talk about in a hot second. He is a spring chicken. He's only 21 years old, but I think last year was pretty catastrophic for him. No one's expecting him to keep pace with Albon, I don't think. But even given that, he basically couldn't have done much worse. Except I guess De Vries technically probably did do worse.
Yeah,
right.
I think this is definitely the put up or shut up year.
Yes,
for him.
I think that's fair to say, which is a big shame, especially as we really don't get that many American drivers. Even though there's a lot, the sport is owned by Americans and there's American teams.
Very true. Well, as you alluded, Danny, AlphaTauri is no more. Long live Visa Cash App RB.
Jesus,
not Arby's. That would be more fun.
We got the cars.
So they really are doing this where it's not Visa Cash App Red Bull. They don't want people saying that.
No. Yeah, as you might be able to tell from its Byzantine name, it is sort of a sister team to Red Bull. RB stands for, or it doesn't, but it does, Red Bull. There are limits about how much technical information you can share with another team, but in the past, Red Bull has used this team as sort of a farm system for its younger drivers. That may be changing. There's talk of the team wanting to assert themselves as a stronger force in and of themselves, but the Red Bull connection is still very strong. I am very curious to see what the identity of this team will be. I mean, I think we're calling it RB. I think that's the shorthand. I'm not calling it Vcash app RB, and I don't think I'm also calling it VCarb. The acronym.
VCarb. Oh, I might call it VCarb. I like that.
It is a blue and red. I actually really like their livery, though. They've for the past few years they've had, or I think this is actually reminiscent of a livery that was like 3 years ago that I really enjoyed.
It also kind of looks like a credit card.
Okay. They've got that Honda / Red Bull engine in there. It is an Italian team, actually based in Italy. Their team principal is a guy named Laurent Mekis. He stepped in at the end of last year. He is the former sporting director at Ferrari, though before that he worked at the FIA, the sports governing body, as safety director and deputy race director, so he knows a few things about cars. And has served as a race engineer and head of vehicle performance at the team's two times ago. It was called Toro Rosso,
which was a great name because that's Italian for
Red Bull. So yeah, he's been there before. He is coming back. I think he was actually there when it was called Minardi. So that's that's what happens in F1 is these teams just get renamed. They occasionally there is a brand new team. We'll get to that. The newest one, although it's been some years, and another one is trying to come in. I'm sure we'll hear all about that over the course of the season. But yeah, this is the 8th place team last year. Their drivers are Yuki Tsunoda from Japan. He is 23 years old. Last year, he placed 14th in the Drivers' Championship. He is another one that came in sort of as a question mark, and we weren't really sure if he was going to have a second season because he kept crashing the car.
He did,
and he's pretty funny on Drive to Survive. Someone asked him what his favorite thing about F1 is, and he said the food at the hospitality suites. He's great. He's really fiery over the radio, and he's matured as a driver. I think a lot like you were mentioning Lando Norris has. I don't know that he is maybe as flashy, but he outpaced his teammate at least, who granted was only in the car for part of the season. That teammate, Daniel Ricciardo from Australia. He is 34 years old. Last year placed 17th, but he has also bounced around in and out of the sport. He is back in, having spent a year or so on the sidelines. He's one that's had a lot of experience at the top. He used to drive for Red Bull. Just everyone has touched Red Bull in some way here. And everyone's got a story. His was that Max Verstappen came in and he was like, I don't want to be this fish in this Max Verstappen pond. So he bailed and went to Renault, as it was called at the time, now Alpine. That didn't really pan out. But now he's back in RB and just loves that roast beef.
Real quick.
Is that what it stands for?
Is that what RB stands for?
Oh my God.
See, this is the thing, right? Like that's the naming partnership they need to pursue next year.
Arby's?
Yeah.
Is just like go that direction. Real quick, just because you mentioned, it's kind of weird what is happening with this team with like how independent, how competitive they want to be. Their justification for this ridiculous name was they wanted a title sponsor would kick in more. So it kind of sounds like they had to basically hang this awful billboard on the name of their car. But the weird thing is, yes, they are based in Italy. Historically, they've been based in Italy. This year, apparently, extensive parts of the operation are being relocated to the UK, to Milton Keynes, where Red Bull is based.
Wow.
And so there's kind of like, it's really hard to know what's going on with this team. Sometimes it looks like it's being prepared for sale.
Right.
Just in case Red Bull doesn't want to operate two teams and wants to pocket $1 billion selling a team to someone who wants to get into the sport. And then there's other ways in which it looks like it is being sort of brought even more closely under the supervision of the sort of the heart of the Red Bull racing operation. And Zach Brown all but accused, I guess, Red Bull of relocating operations to Milton Keynes to blur how the budget was being spent between the two teams. So
Nice.
real weird vibes around the future of this team.
The canteen budget specifically.
Yeah.
This is why we love F1. There's so many stories on and off the track. And speaking of sponsors and
boy.
branding,
Oh boy.
Rob, tell us who's next.
Kick Sauber. Well, Stake F1 team Kick Sauber. So, some history. Sauber is, a long-standing at this point team in F1, and they have a proud history of being one of the worst teams on the grid, operating on a shoestring budget.
Hey, look, Marussia would like to talk to you about that.
You're right. But Sauber, yes, Sauber always made payroll. So shout outs to
Yes.
Sauber.
Marussia is kind of still here, Danny. I'll get to that next.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, so Sauber had a sort of naming partnership with Alfa Romeo, and they raced as Alfa Romeo for a number of years. And then the team is being taken over by Audi in 2026 when a whole new raft of regulations come into play. The plan is for Audi then to run this team as an Audi works team. It's going to be an Audi powertrain, all this stuff. We just haven't heard too much about this, and there's some rumors that maybe this marriage isn't as this engagement is not as sort of rock solid as it was once thought. But in the meantime, before Audi comes in, they are partnering with some of those prestigious brands in the world, like Stake and Kick. Which one of those
Household names?
Which one of those is the crypto casino?
I think that's Stake.
Steak. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And and that's kind of the real money sponsoring the team, but they kind of can't do that too much because there's laws against gambling, in tons of like advertising gambling in tons of places. So Kick is there. They're the streamer, right, Drew?
Yes, they're the fewer decency rules live streaming.
Yeah. It's like Twitch, but with more people betting on horses. But like fake digital horses.
And in keeping with that, they kind of like it's kind of a cool looking car, but also it's the kind of a car that you get when it's like, what's going on with your whole sponsorship situation? Like, are you a for real operation? They have a highlighter neon green livery that is lightly accenting the same black unpainted carbon fiber that everyone else is running as their primary color. They get their engines from Ferrari. They're based out of Switzerland. Their team principal is Alessandro Aluni Bravi, a sort of longtime suit in motorsports. They have been declining in form in recent years. Last year, they placed 9th. They have two drivers, both on the last year of their contract, I believe. One is Valtteri Bottas, a Finnish driver, placed 15th last year. He's 34 years old. For a long time was teammate of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes and established beyond all doubt that he is not championship timber at Mercedes, but a very good driver on his day. The results haven't really come at Sauber, but again, they haven't been the best cars. Zhou Guanyu is a Chinese driver. Last year finished 18th. He's 24 years old. It's also unclear what his future is. Both drivers would love, of course, to stay there for when Audi shows up and brings the real money and the real engineering budget. But neither's future is secure. Zhou is seems like a perfectly fine driver. It's again hard to tell how good people are in that Alpha, but one of the major factors that led to Zhou getting a seat was the fact that Alfa Romeo is a Fiat brand that was trying to raise its profile in the Chinese auto market, and so it was theorized that having a Chinese driver racing for the team would succeed in doing that. Doesn't seem, I've heard that it didn't fully work out, but I suspect the fact that COVID happened and F1 has not run in China basically since Zhou joined the team did not help the cause of the team's profile abroad. But yeah, both these guys, are kind of in a prove it year, and it's going to be tough to prove it in that car based on recent history. And the prize at the end of it is if Audi comes into the team with the kind of budget and resources people are thinking, suddenly you would have a potentially front running team. New seats open up at a contender. So it's theirs to lose. A lot at stake for them this season.
See what you did there.
Our final team, to put a stake in it, if you will. That doesn't make any sense. Our final team is a team that we love, though, right, Drew?
Well, so Haas F1 team, as I alluded earlier, they're the most new team to Formula One. They actually kind of bought the factory of an old team called Marussia. They are nominally an American team. They're owned by American businessman Gene Haas, his company makes CNC machines, which are basically factory robots. Ironically, though, this team farms out as many parts of their car as is allowed by the regulations. And they do this to keep the costs down. It's an idea that initially returned pretty good results, placing the team in 5th in 2018, which is just the 3rd year of their existence. But it has been pretty downhill from there. 9th, 10th, 8th, 10th. And as a result, their team principal, Drive to Survive's darling, Gunther Steiner, was fired earlier this year and replaced by the team's former trackside engineering director, Eyo Komatsu. It sounds like they're doing sort of a tag team principle thing there, where Komatsu's going to run the technical side and someone else is going to come in and run like the fundraising side, the money, the wheeling and dealing that the team principal often does. So
they don't have Gunter around to take pictures for IKEA catalogs anymore.
That's true. Yeah. Who will do
that?
God. I would say don't expect just, by putting a new team principal in there, there's going to be some rebuilding. Don't expect anything different maybe in this first year. I think Komatsu is going to need some time to turn things around if he can. Their livery is black and red with a little white. They run a Ferrari engine. In fact, a lot of Ferrari parts. They are technically American, but they're based in the UK. And last year they placed dead last. Their drivers also didn't fare too well. They placed 16th and 19th respectively, both journeymen. Nico Hulkenberg is a German driver, 36 years old. He, like Ricardo, did it's not easy to do, is to leave Formula One and come back. Actually, both of their drivers did this. Kevin Magnussen, the other driver on Haas, he is Danish. He's 31 years old. I believe he left Formula One twice. I think he was with McLaren early on and they let him go. And then he did some welding for a while and then they brought him back. Yeah. So he's both of them have been in and out. They're both very talented. Hulkenberg, I think, though, really sort of shone when he came into the team and outshined Magnussen, who had been with the team for much longer. I think, let's see. Yes, both of their contracts are up at the end of the year. So another one to watch. And with that is all the teams and drivers. We're going to take one more commercial break, and then we'll be back with all kinds of details like what's up with cars, what's up with tires and strategy, rules and regs. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Rob, tell me about cars.
All right, so Lightning McQueen is the best car racer in the racing circuit, but he has a problem, which is kind of an asshole. So no, sorry, you mean F1 cars. Yes. I guess we should start with the sort of heart of an F1 car, the engine. First thing, they don't like it when you call them engines. Obviously, everyone does, but the term of art that people prefer to use is power units. Why is that? Because an engine is an internal combustion engine. That's probably what's in your car, though maybe you have electric motors powering it, which, if you do, that's very cool. But all F1 engines are really complicated hybrids, way more complicated than the hybrid you might be familiar with from like a Prius. So F1 engines, used to be huge, monstrous internal combustion, powerhouses. They kept sort of shrinking them down to make the sport more sustainable from a variety of angles. Once upon a time, you would build special engines just for qualifying the car that had maybe a lap of running in them. Now they require you to make three engines, effectively, 3 power units, last the entire season. I'm not sure how it's 4 now. It's 4
this
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this has gotten better. For a number of years, nobody actually did that. It would just be at a certain point, everyone would be like, well, we're going to take penalties now and deploy the new power units. I do feel like reliability has been getting up, in part because this used to be the center of a lot of development for F1, but they froze the engine specification while waiting for the 2026 regulations to come in, which means theoretically the engines should all be roughly equally good. The people making the engines are Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine, and Honda. Alpine's in kind of a weird place. They only supply themselves. And last year there were some noises that they wanted some help because their engine isn't very good. And so even in a sport where they've kind of tried to make all the engines equivalent to each other, when the freeze occurred, you still were working from the engine you had. Alpine didn't have a very good one. Apparently they haven't quite fully managed to narrow the gap to the other suppliers. So the way in a F1 engine, a power unit works, you still have a V6 turbo engine in it. The internal combustion part is a ridiculous piece of machinery. Your car probably, tops out on your little tachometer. You see it like, red lines at like 7,000, 8,000 revs. You never actually get anywhere near their driving. F1 cars get up to 15,000 revs as they're racing, and they are assisted by a turbocharger. And then they also have electric motors assisting them that draw power from 2 sources. The kinetic energy recovery system, the MGUK, and the thermal energy recovery system, MGUH. The MGUH is going away in 2026 because it's a huge pain in the ass, because recovering waste heat from an engine and turning into usable energy is really, really complicated, and made researching these things much more expensive, and isn't really relevant to the direction that a lot of road cars are going, which are just getting more and more electrified, and the heat issues there are very different. What F1 has that anyone who has a hybrid is familiar with is kinetic energy recovery, which is all the things that a car does that create like wasted energy from like slowing down, particularly braking. The car tries to harvest energy from that and use that to spin the battery back up. The rules limit how much kinetic, like electrical energy you can recover each lap. So occasionally you will hear like a team runs afoul of rules regarding these like recharge rates, because this is one of the things that F1 just has in place to make sure that everyone's sort of dealing with the same spec, and that nobody's secretly running like, what if we get even more electrical boost the way this works? Because that is kind of how the car is designed. The internal combustion engine might be the heart of it, but the battery is critical for assisting it to reach sort of the top of its potential. If either of these systems break down, and they used to pretty frequently, a bit less so now, the engine doesn't really work without all the pieces working together in peak performance. Drivers get very antsy about this. You will hear radio calls in the race where it's like, no power, no power. And drivers, the second they begin to feel that when they get on the loud pedal, the accelerator, and the thing that they expect to happen doesn't, they immediately begin to suspect that one of these complicated components is breaking down. So with the engines kind of locked, where is the real competition in F1 car design? Well, it's probably in aerodynamics. Aerodynamics are where the F1 cars get a lot of their grip, particularly at high speeds, which lets them corner. most car, like the foundation of a car is mechanical grip. That's the chassis and where the rubber meets the road. But aerodynamic grip is very important for cars moving as fast as F1 cars do, because of those speeds. The wings and the contours of the car generate a lot of force that keep them planted firmly on the ground. Now, it used to be that, the aerodynamic competition was really, really fierce, and the cars got more and more baroque in the sort of in the Rococo sense, the aesthetic sense, where just they had all sorts of weird veins and doodads hanging off the wings. It got a little too complicated, and also it started causing problems because when you take a car out of a lab environment, say a wind tunnel, and have it running real fast on a track with a bunch of other cars, suddenly all those aerodynamic elements work way less well when another car with similar aerodynamic elements has come and just stirred the whole pot, creating what is called like dirty air from the wash of a car passing through. And so one of the things that F1 did, because this would really disturb the ability of cars to race closely together, which most of us consider good racing, is, it would make it for boring races without a lot of passing. So F1 wanted to de-emphasize that type of, really complicated aerodynamics that has a ton of like dirty air blasting off the back of a car. And they embraced ground effect aerodynamics. And ground effect aerodynamics, as the name implies, is kind of sort of a degree of like aerodynamic harnessing that's taking place between the underbody of a car and the ground, where you can sort of channel air there and create almost like a bit of suction to the tarmac between the car and the tarmac. That was a huge aerodynamic revolution in F1, and only one designer had any experience with ground effect aerodynamics, because this was a thing that came up in the 80s and then was taken away because it was kind of dangerous as hell. It's less dangerous now, but we'll set that aside. But yeah, Red Bull's Adrian Newey was the only guy with hands-on experience, and Red Bull was the only team that really nailed the new aerodynamic specs.
Yeah.
Everyone else really struggled with it. And some have gotten on top of it a bit better, but like you could say that the addition of ground effect regulations ended Mercedes' run as a top team and inaugurated this new era of Red Bull. The other thing I'd say is, like, I'm not sure everyone loves these cars. They have kind of weird handling characteristics. The cars get heavier every year for safety reasons, but the emphasis on ground effect aerodynamics kind of changed how the cars function a lot and changed how they drive a lot. I'm not sure every driver really loves it. The thing they really don't love is something called porpoising, which is as a car, because you have like now aerodynamic stuff happening under the car, that stuff can stall out if your ride height settings are at all like kind of wonky. And the effect of that is the car starts bouncing wildly down the tarmac and can be really jarring on the driver. Team's gotten a little bit on top of the problem, but it certainly seems like F1 drivers are getting knocked around the cockpit a lot more than they were in previous years. So the other part of how an F1 car is able to perform so well at speed is tires. And the more F1 you watch, the more you might start to get the sense that all of this is kind of about how well cars handle their tires. So F1 has one tire supplier, Pirelli. And Pirelli's job with F1 has been to create tires that, are they the best tires possible? No. They're tires designed to create for interesting, contrasting racing solutions, approaches during races. Their mechanism for doing this, F1 teams, Pirelli decides what set of tires, what array of tire options teams will have with them on a race weekend. There are 5 tire compounds. C1, compound 1, is the hardest compound. C5 is the softest. The harder the compound, the less grip it has, is sort of the rule of thumb. Softer compounds have more grip, but they wear much, much faster. The other thing that contributes to this is they warm up at different rates. Hard compound tires are very slow to come up to temperature. Softer tires are quick to get into the optimal temperature range, but then will also be the ones to sort of fall off and maybe overheat as well. You'll recognize these three compounds. Whatever is the hardest compound at the race weekend will be white striped. The medium compound will be yellow striped, and the softest compound will be red striped. They bring different sets of three to the different tracks based on track conditions, usually like the quality of the racing surface, local temperatures. But the key thing here is that during the race, everyone has to use two compounds unless it rains. So the idea here being that teams will have different strategies deploying this requirement and using these very different tire compounds against each other. I'm not sure it always pans out that way. Tends to be a lot of convergence on what tire strategies are, but you do see a lot of curveballs thrown there. But usually the most reliable generator of chaos when it comes to tire strategy is rain. F1 has two wet weather tires. Used to be you saw both of them in racing action because F1, unlike some other forms of racing, F1 kind of races rain or shine. In light to moderately heavy rain, they run green striped intermediate compound tires. They have a very little bit of tread on them. All the other tires are racing slicks, which give you huge grip in dry conditions and very little grip in wet conditions. The Inters have a little bit of tread. And increasingly, those are the only tires where you see the cars actually racing in wet conditions, because nowadays, when the rain is heavy enough for the blue striped full wets to come out, it usually doesn't take too long after that for somebody to throw a red flag and suspend the race because it is too dangerous to continue driving. They're kind of in a weird place with these tires where if it's wet enough for the wet tires, it maybe is too wet for them to continue racing. And there's some argument that the wets themselves have gotten so good at dissipating water that they just aerosolize it so perfectly that they create an impenetrable fog bank that will not dissipate as long as cars are racing around the track in the wet weather tires. A real feat of engineering, but also means that in certain conditions the cars will just go park on the grid rather than continue racing. Some terms you're going to hear come up with tires as they run. They abrade, and you will see them throwing off little chunks of rubber here and there, and those are marbles. You'll see, from the start of a pristine racing track at the start, after a few laps, there are just swaths of the track covered in these little bits of rubbery crap that if a car gets on that, now it's like you're running onto a field of ball bearings, and it gets very slippery. And also that stuff sticks to your tires and destroys their grip, so that's bad. The other thing is tires have really fussy operating windows where they're at their best. If they aren't in those operating windows, you start getting a type of wear called graining, which is kind of an uneven sort of rate of wear on the tires. They're sort of wearing away too fast, and they're not producing enough grip. Usually tires have a graining phase that they pass through, and then sort of things resume as normal. A thing that is not normal, you definitely want to avoid, but you're at high risk of, especially when you have nice new tires, is flat spotting your tires. F1 doesn't have anti-lock brakes. Now you might think, but my shitty car does. Why don't they? I thought these things were supposed to be sophisticated. Well, at a certain point, about 20 years ago, when all these driver assistive technologies started to come into their own, there was concern that the cars were driving themselves and that too many parts of the traditional driver's art were being taken away. There's something to this. For instance, they all have sequential gearboxes now with the paddles, and you just can't have somebody miss a gear shift like they used to, which used to be very exciting when it happened. So now the thing you look for is occasionally somebody just botches their braking a little bit, or the brakes don't bite correctly, and the brakes will lock, the tire will stop rotating properly, and it will just skid, and that skidding will effectively flatten will create basically a face of the tire where it should be a round piece of rubber. And that doesn't go away for the rest of the time on the tire. It's going to go around. There's going to be a kerchunk, and the grip level is going to be weird. It's going to feel terrible because there's that flat spot. If you want to, get off that tire, you're going to have to go in for a pit stop. And pit strategy is, especially when the racing is maybe not terribly amazing, you start, you'll be watching for those pit stops because that's where the real action is. That's where these other racing series, they'll be selling you on like cool wheel-to-wheel action, duels, awesome overtakes. And F1 sometimes has that stuff too. Hasn't as much at the front lately, but, part of the mark of being really in F1 is you start getting ridiculously excited over watching interval information about how far apart two cars are and what it implies for how the pit stop is going to go. So, because of the tire regulations, everyone's going to have to stop for a change of tires at least once during a race. Usually, you're going to have to stop multiple times. The pit stops are very, very fast as far as like the amount of time they are in the pit box. It is almost like the blink of an eye. A 3-second pit stop is like good. That's acceptable. The closer to 2 seconds flat you can get, the better that pit stop is. Anything over 3, that's kind of a bad pit stop. Now, that's just for changing tires. If you have to do anything else, if a car needs some modest repairs, there's really only like one manageable repair that's possible in the pit stop, which is a front wing replacement. Everything else starts to become prohibitively expensive in terms of time. But that all takes much longer. So when you see a car like get some damage, everyone on the team would, they'd rather die than actually replace that part because it takes too long. The pit stop itself is very, very fast. How bad it is to have to pit kind of varies by track because the pit lanes have different layouts and they're different lengths. But the thing they share is a speed limit because, there's people working in the pit lane. And so you're not allowed to come blazing in at 150 miles an hour and then stop on a dime. You have to observe a safe speed limit. And that is where the bulk of the time you lose to other drivers comes from in the pits. There are two major strategies, racing tactics, associated with pit stops and the way tires work. The undercut is the most straightforward and the most common way to attack this problem. If you are following somebody and you can't get past them, you come in for fresh tires, and then the theory is that you'll be so much faster than them on the fresh tires that before they can stop, you will be inside the length of time they have to set aside for doing a pit stop. So yeah, it's like strike first on getting fresh tires, and then use those fresh tires, which are presumably going to be better performers, and go take the spot, win the battle in the pit lane. The overcut is the inverse of that. You see it much less, but it's always kind of cool when it works. Again, the idea is this time you wait for someone to go in, and you have the theory that you still have your fastest laps ahead of you. You'll be faster on your old tires than they will be on their new tires. And so when they stop, you will overtake them because you stay out to stay on the track. And then your ensuing laps will be so fast that by the time you have to stop for fresh tires, you will have created a safe gap so that they can't overtake you again when you stop for fresh tires. That is a really chancy strategy because most of the time, fresh tires are always better. There have been a couple places, usually when temperatures are weird and making tires get in the sweet spot is really hard, that the overcut begins to make more sense. It's always a very cool thing to see it pulled out, totally. But you're going to see the undercut way more. And yeah, the thing to keep an eye out for is the weather, because all of these factors just get amplified by uncertain mixed conditions.
All right. Well, of course, we've got cars, we got strategy, we also have rules, Danny. We got to keep things in the lines. What else is everybody worrying about out there as we go around the track?
Rules are important. Without rules, society would be chaos. Instead of this podcast, we would all be tearing out each other's eyeballs and feasting on the delicious brain innards within. So Formula One, like much of society, has rules. Formula One also has flags. Flags are part of the rules. Flags are how you tell a driver what's going on because they can't hear you. They're too busy driving the car and it's very loud and they have this big lid on their head. So instead, they have lots of these people around the track waving flags at them all the time, like semaphore, much like, all of the best parts of our cultures. I'm going to tell you about some of these flags. I'm going to tell you what these flags are. But a lot of this, and honestly, a lot of the penalties and a lot of the ins and outs are sort of intuited through watching the race and through seeing them, seeing specific incidents happening and then sort of understanding the rules through those lenses, which is kind of the case with all sports. I definitely learned baseball and basketball and football through those, through that sort of way. So let's get to the flags. They're quite easy. The green flag. The green flag means, hey, everything's fine. Keep racing. Normal racing conditions are happening. Maybe there was another flag before and the green flag is like, don't worry, we're back to normal. Then you have yellow flags. Yellow flags mean something up. If there's a waved yellow flag, a single waved yellow, that means don't overtake. There's a danger somewhere on the track. You're about to come up to it. If there are double yellows, that also means don't overtake, but usually that means an instance that is actually blocking the track. So you got to be even more careful. You can get in trouble if you don't slow down enough during these phases. Happens a lot in qualifying. A single stationary yellow means that there's no overtaking due to a danger near the track, which is sort of sitting in the middle there somewhere. As you could probably guess, the red flag is the worst of these. If you've ever looked at a traffic light, you're starting to get the point. The red flag basically means that the session has stopped. If a race has red flagged, all the cars come back to the pits. If qualifying does, they just stop everything. Usually means there's been a pretty big crash. Perhaps a part of the track has been damaged enough that they have to sort of take a bit of time to fix it.
Yeah, or bad rain, like Rob said.
Exactly. Yeah, inclement weather. There's a bunch of reasons why this can happen. Now they're all the normal ones. Now we're going to get into some of the funky ones, all right? You got the red and yellow striped flag. That means there's debris or maybe some oil on the track. And if they're rocking it from back and forth, that means there could be an animal on the track, live or otherwise. Blue flags are very common, but a little bit confusing if you're new to the sport. These cars are driving, as Drew said earlier, like 200 miles for, some period of between an hour and a half and 2 hours, usually about an hour and a half. When that happens, the lead driver often gets to a point where he's overtaking some of the drivers at the back of the field. The blue flag is for the cars that are being overtaked to warn them that there is somebody faster coming up and that they need to get out of the way. Then we have a black flag with an orange circle in it, sort of lovingly known as the meatball flag, which means that you have a mechanical problem on your car. Oftentimes this is basically you need to come into the pits because there's a bit of your car hanging off and it's kind of dangerous for everyone else. The half black, half white flag is a sort of precursor to the black flag. It basically means you've done something unsportsmanlike, to knock on the knuckles. And then if you get the black flag, often there is a number put on it too. It means you've been disqualified. Black flags are fairly rare, I think. I can't remember the last one we've had in the modern era. The checkered flag, of course, is waved at the end of the race. Black and white checkered flag. And then we also have something called a safety car, which is basically whenever many of these incidents will require one. It's essentially a very fast car, but looks quite slow compared to the Formula One cars, that drives out and sort of acts as a pace car that all the other cars drive behind, and it guides them around issues that are on the track, keeps them moving, but sort of keeps them out of danger. It also bunches up the field. So when the safety car comes in, maybe the position 3 was 5 seconds ahead of position 4. By the time the safety car comes in, that gap has been reduced to basically nothing because they're driving right behind each other. Then there's something called a virtual safety car, which acts in many ways like the safety car. It's basically tells the drivers to drive within a certain time delta, so it's slowing them all down. But instead of the safety car packing them all up, they keep their, well, hopefully they keep their relative space to each other the same, so that when the virtual safety car is ended, I guess there's less of a sporting penalty on everyone or on certain people. The roll of the dice that happens with the safety car doesn't really happen. Now, if you break the rules, you're going to get a rap on the knuckles. Maybe you lose some of that beautiful, aerodynamic time. That's if teams do things that are wrong. But if drivers do things, oftentimes they get penalties during the races, and they don't like that at all. You can get penalties for lots of different things, and generally there is a bigger penalty for the bigger sin sort of thing. So you could get a drive-through penalty, which basically means you have to drive into the pits and out of the pits at the slower speed that Rob had mentioned earlier, which kind of messes up your time. You're going to get a bunch of cars overtaking you when you do that. You can get that for doing things like skipping the limits of the track over and over again, cutting corners, jumping over chicanes, things like that. They'll generally give you some sort of warning if you're going to get one of those. There are 5-second penalties and 10-second penalties. 5-second could be for little infringements, like, I don't know, knocking into a car a little bit and blocking somebody's small sort of infringements. A 10-second penalty or a stop-go penalty, which often happens as well, where the driver has to come into the pit and sit there and nobody's allowed to touch them, and then they are allowed to go after the amount of time has passed. That's an even worse one. Have they said this year? Remember last year they said something along the lines of they were going to try and do those a little bit less? I'm trying to
stop
remember.
and goes.
Yeah, or were they doing them more?
They almost never assign them though.
That's true.
That's like the electric chair in F1.
You're right. Yeah. I think there was. I remember 5-second stop goes being ran a lot more than the 10-second ones.
I mean, F1 has, like, because you're mentioning the penalty stuff. I think just one thing that is probably going to confuse you is, and Danny's especially getting into this about like driving standards, but like a lot of this stuff, some of it's black and white because it's like, like it's a thing we can like put a ruler next to your car. That's not legal. You can't do that. But some of this is like eye of the beholder stuff. And it gets adjudicated very weirdly and contradictorily in ways that'll probably confuse you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some stuff that's done during the race, and then there's some stuff that's done after the race or after qualifying. Like, for instance, getting a extra or a grid penalty so that you have, you're knocked back 3 positions or 5 positions or put to the back of the grid because you did something maybe during qualifying you weren't meant to, or maybe you changed a gearbox when you get a penalty for that, or you might get a grid position penalty for the next race if you did something near the end of the previous race that they couldn't really penalize you for at the time. Race bans are possible but extremely rare. And you can get a 10-place penalty after 5 reprimands. And the way the reprimands work are kind of funny in F1 because it's done on a sort of 12-month calendar. So if you have a blot on your license, it goes once you've spent, once you're basically 12 months away from it. So sometimes people will have higher numbers of points on their license depending on when it happens. It's not within seasons. To Rob's point, defending and like what a clean overtake is, what a clean block is, all of those things are somewhat open to interpretation. There's some general rules of thumbs. If you're the car ahead and somebody's trying to overtake you, you can defend in one direction, but you're not allowed to make a double movement. Like, you're not allowed to duke to the right and then duke to the left, like to basically block somebody. They will probably run into the back of you. It's a dangerous thing to do. Sort of last minute weird changes in direction are also not particularly looked upon. The thing you're going to, or looked fondly upon, the thing you're going to realize as well is that while there's no lines on the track, there is a sort of an invisible driver's line that exists, and whether or not you are on that or not often becomes an element in sort of where blame is laid at the end of the day with some of these situations. And when you're in a position where there are two cars driving down a straight or taking a corner together, you have to leave a gap for that car to be there. You're not allowed basically squeeze them off the track. Although the limits of that have been tested again many times over.
Well, and I think
in high
just real quick on that point, I think that and the track limits thing, a thing to bear in mind, because it's hard to get this from the TV. The drivers can't see out of the cars very well. And the cars are really heavy and they're prone to understeering, which means you're turning left and the car's not going as left as you think. It's sort of going more straight than you would like. And so those two factors, like not really being able to see, and not, which means you also can't see where other cars are. And then the fact that cars tend to not hold where the driver's trying to point them makes for a lot of weirdness about like the track limit stuff. Drivers just have no idea where the track limits are when they're driving. You're going to see guys get in trouble with that all the time. But especially the stuff about leaving a gap or like running people off, that stuff gets real weird because sometimes you get like, there are drivers who are like really ruthless about that stuff. But then there are also times you just get the sense that like these things are hard to drive. Nobody can see. And then it kind of falls to the stewards to decide what happened here and whether it's a rules infraction.
Right. A couple of changes this year for folks who already know most of this. The DRS being enabled used to be after 2 laps. This year, they're going to reduce it to 1 lap. So that is both at the start of the race and at any moment when the race is resumed. After
Danny, I forgot to talk about the DRS, about all the aero stuff, real quick.
Oh,
What's the DRS?
With me, the drag reduction system?
Yeah.
I'll tell you about the drag reduction system. So there's a big wing on the back of the car, which you can see at the back of the car sticking right up, and it has a big plank in the front of it. And DRS is effectively a button that the driver can press only in specific parts of the track at specific circumstances. That will open up that flap and basically reduce the amount of drag that wing at the back of the car is doing, give them some extra speed going down, generally, basically all the time, going down specific straights. You can only deploy it, you can only press that button when you're within 1 second of the car ahead of you, be that a car that you're racing for position or not. And yeah, effectively it's a overtake button of sorts that was introduced about a decade ago now to help give drivers that little bit of extra horsepower they needed, like sprinkled on top to get the overtake done safely. The position and length of these DRS zones, as they're known, is modified often every year. So we'll give you an update before each race as to where they are. And in general, during practice and qualifying, they are allowed to have the DRS open kind of whenever they want. It's not really penalized then. Just during the race, you're only allowed to have it.
Yeah, it gives about a 12 mile an hour boost.
Right, which on these long straights can make a massive difference. You can see it almost like a slingshot. You can kind of see it.
I think during qualifying now, the DRS in practice, the DRS only opens now in the detection zone, in the proper zone. It used to be you could just open that thing up willy nilly when they first introduced it, like during practice and qualifying. I think they got away from that.
Do you think quali as well?
Yeah, I don't think the button works now outside the DRS zone.
Okay.
Don't want to open it in a corner because you need that grip and you need that downforce in the back to be able to make turns.
Yes. If you opened it on one of those F1 corners with the cars going the speeds they do, you would quickly lose the back of the car and spin off the track. A couple of other little bits and bobs. They're going to test out the wheel covers in a couple of races this year. They haven't said where, but that's coming down the road. They have also talked about, or they're allowing teams rather, to add what is known as a cockpit scoop. I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but effectively it is it's something to combat the heat problems that the drivers were having last year, notably in Bahrain. So it's some type of cooling thing. I'm not actually
like a little
sure
blower.
I'm wondering, is it something
imagine
that directs air in or something? Yeah. They go on. Yeah.
Logan Sargent on Williams last year he was 20 years old,
right? Had
to stop racing because he was suffering from heat exhaustion. He just pulled it into the pits and said, I can't do it anymore.
Super dangerous. Yeah. So I think the way I read it was that they were allowing teams to develop these. So I'm guessing when these liveries were being announced over the past few weeks, then we'll start to see, we are seeing them, but I don't know what it looks like. So I don't know who's done it and what it is. You already talked about the new sprint format. No point in going over that again, but they changed it from last year. And as I mentioned earlier, they have allowed the maximum number of power units to go 1 up from 3 last year to 4 this year. And one more, the right of review thing. So if the stewards decide a certain thing at the end of a race, usually there was 2 weeks you were allowed to appeal something. That has now been limited to 4 days. So you really have to come up with something and submit it pretty quickly if this year anyway.
All right. Well, I'm going to go down some lingo here that doesn't really fit anywhere else that maybe we haven't talked about. Rob, I know you were mentioning flat spots. Those are caused by, like you said, maybe pressing too hard on the brakes. If flat spotting happens, they'll say it's a lockup. A lockup is when flat spotting happens. You can see it by like a puff of smoke coming from the tires themselves. When drivers are called in to the pits, you'll hear them say over the radio, box. That's code for pit. A couple of phrases you'll hear on the broadcast. One is speed trap. I've heard people get kind of tripped up by this one. It's not like there's not a cop out there and you're not going to get penalized for going too fast. It's just the name for the place on the track where the cars are fastest. I think they just point this out because it's fun for people to know how fast the cars are going. The cars will go up to maybe 225. Interestingly, there are cars that go faster, like drag strip cars will go 300 plus or whatever, but only over a quarter mile. Cars like, or series like NASCAR and IndyCar will have faster average lap time, or speed rather, around an oval track. But for circuits, for your classic racetrack, no cars can go around those faster than F1 cars with your straights and your corners. Pit window is another sort of weird broadcast only, or not broadcast only, but you hear it on the broadcast a lot. And in fact, a graphic will pop up and say pit window open. That doesn't mean that the teams are required to pit during that window. It just means that the commentators are guessing that this is probably when cars are going to pit. Back marker, Danny mentioned that blue flags will get waved for cars that are being lapped. Those cars are called back markers. Purple sector, or going purple. You'll see this a lot in qualifying. The track is for convenience sake divided into 3 sectors. So we can talk about, the first sector is like this, the second sector is like this. And during qualifying, you will see each sort of sector of the track will get its own time per driver. So you can see whether they're improving in that part of the track. If they are the fastest of all in that sector, their name will turn purple. And if they do the fastest lap, the whole track will be purple. And so that's what purple means, because it just refers to the color of the graphic. Danny mentioned chicane. That is it's a quick either left-right or right-left on the track. It's like a really sort of sharp turn and followed by another quick sharp turn. So the car is required to often go certainly slower than they would in a straight, and then maneuver the car really quickly. It's a fun feature of circuits. Some other stuff here. When you see flashing lights on the back of a car, that means that the car is using the kinetic energy recovery that Rob mentioned. And it's sort of a warning to the driver behind that, hey, I'm recovering energy. It means that my deceleration rate is going to be greater. So watch out. I'm slowing down pretty quickly ahead of this corner or even along a straight. The drivers have radios. They also have to talk to the pit wall, as it's called. They only really can, or they, for convenience or for the driver's own sanity, they're really only talking to one person. It's the race engineer. It's a lot like NASA. You have Capcom, because you don't want everyone talking to the astronauts. It's too confusing. So everything goes through the race engineer, and they are the one who talks to the driver. They also have a drink system, the drivers do, which is critical in places like Bahrain or Singapore, where it is boiling hot. Like the drivers can lose multiple kilograms during a single race. And they are athletes. They, there is no power steering in these cars, so they really have to muscle them around. And the brakes are, even though they are brake by wire, so they're not actually actuating the brake with their feet, because of the finesse needed to accurately give the brakes exactly how much pressure you need, the pressure required is very high. And so a normal person, wouldn't necessarily be able to fully apply the brakes in an F1 car. So it is a very physical activity.
Yeah, to say nothing of the G forces too, right? Like
Totally.
If you want to see who's an F1 driver, look at their neck.
Yes, there is a oft shared video of Fernando Alonso at a party, literally cracking a walnut with his between his shoulder and his head.
Oh my God.
With his neck. It's insane.
Incredible.
Also insane, Danny, this year's calendar.
Yes. Okay. So this is the part of F1 that I enjoy the most, I think. It is the traveling circus. It is the fact that we bring this sport to places really not all around the world, but to a large part of the world. Lots of really interesting places. This will be the year that has the most races in Formula One history. There are 24 races. I believe you said 21 different locations. That makes sense because we have 3 in the United States and 2 in Italy. But otherwise, you are in different countries the whole time. A couple of changes this year. First of all, China should be back the first time since 2019. That is related to the COVID-19 pandemic and China's sort of extended quarantines that they've had over the past number of years. The Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix will return this year. You might remember it was cancelled last year because of some pretty disastrous flooding that they had right before the race weekend, like a day before. They had absolutely awful flash flooding, and a lot of the local population had to sort of recover from that. And just to mention again that Russia is cancelled. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine basically had F1 tear up their contract for the seasons that they had signed for. This is one of those seasons. So just worth mentioning for clarity that there is no Russian Grand Prix, and that actually does have a bit of an effect on the calendar in terms of sort of we have a weird extra gap in the calendar this year. Okay, I'm going to go through all 24 of these circuits. I'm not going to get too much into detail on each one of them. I'm just going to talk about them when they happen and all that sort of stuff. Does that make sense? During the race, during the season, we'll get into more detail on these. The first track is Bahrain, which will be on the 2nd of March in the city of Sakhir. It's a relatively new track. Much newer than that is Saudi Arabia, which is the second one, at the Jeddah Corniche Circuit, which is a street circuit. Some of these circuits are on tracks that are specially created for racing, and some of them are on actual roads, and some of them are on both. We'll have some of those that are sort of an amalgamation of the two. And that's on the 9th of March. That's our first double header. So we start the season with a double header. Then we have a bunch of single races. Australia on the 24th of March in Albert Park, Melbourne. Japan on the 7th of April, 2 weeks later, at the Suzuka International Racing Course in Suzuka. And then we have China returning finally at the Shanghai International Circuit, longest straight on the F1 calendar there, on the 21st of April. And then we are off to America for the very first time, 2 weeks after that one, for the Miami Grand Prix on the 5th of May in the Miami International Autodrome, also known as the car park around the Hard Rock Stadium. So we have a doubleheader, and then we have 3 or 4 races in a row that have 2 week gaps between them. Then we have another doubleheader. Race 7, Emilia-Romagna, returning to Imola on the 19th of May, followed by Monaco a week later at the Principality of Monaco on the 26th of May. Sorry?
By doubleheader, you mean a week separates them.
Yes, exactly. They're back
instead
to
of the
back,
normal
as it
2
were.
weeks. Yeah.
Yes. Then we have the Canadian Grand Prix at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal on the 9th of June, a couple of weeks after the previous one. Then we have a triple header, our first of the year, and looking at this list, not our last. And we have 3 of them this year. That's 3 races in a 3 weekends in a row we have races.
Brutal.
The 10th race of the year is the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona on the 23rd of June, followed by the Austrian Grand Prix on the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg on the 30th, and the British Grand Prix on the 7th of July in Silverstone. We have a 1 week gap, and then we're back to another double header before the mid-season break. Race 13 is in the Hungaroring in Hungary on the 21st of July. And then we have Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium in the Ardennes Forest on the 28th of July. That's race 14 of 24, and we take our mid-season break, which lasts about a month. We return on the 25th of August for a double header. Would you have it? The Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort on the 25th of August, followed by the Italian Grand Prix in Monza on the 1st of September. Then there's another week gap and another double header. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix on the 15th of September in Baku, followed by another fantastic street circuit, the Singapore Grand Prix in Marina Bay on the 22nd of September. Then we have not a mid-season break, but we do basically have a month-long gap. And the reason for this is because this was where Russia was. So between the 22nd of September, we don't have a race until the 20th of October. And that's only
Now,
4.
You might be asking, but wait, didn't Azerbaijan declare war on Armenia again in the past year and wipe out an entire ethnic enclave? Yes. But some things get more international attention than others.
Yeah. Fair to say. We're back to the United States Grand Prix after that sort of mini gap, I guess, for the Circuit of the Americas on the 20th of October. This is a triple header we're returning back to. So we're going to have no races for 3 weeks, and then we're going to have 3 in a row. The Mexican City Grand Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez on the 27th of October, and a week later, Sao Paulo we're off to for the Interlagos GP on the 3rd of November. Then we have another break, and much like last year, we're finishing... Wait, I think much like last year, right? We're finishing with a triple header. I think we did last year too. The Las Vegas Grand Prix on the 23rd of November here on the Strip. I'm actually in Las Vegas right now. Heard some people talking about the F1, which is pretty cool. The Qatar Grand Prix at Lusail International Circuit on the 1st of December. And then the final race will be at Yas Marina in Abu Dhabi, race 24 on the 8th of December. So 3 triple headers, I think. 1, 2, 3... 3 double headers, 4 double headers, and then 2 kind of weird chunks, 2 kind of mid-season breaks, weirdly enough. So it's not exactly evenly laid out this year, but by the time we get to those last races, we'll see if we're sick of F1 or not.
I wonder if I'll actually manage to get my Christmas tree down before the season starts, because it's just very funny that the F1 season just extends from one winter into the next.
Yeah, it's bizarre. 8th of December.
Well, thank you, Danny. I don't know that we mentioned this, and I don't actually know if anyone's ever asked, but I always love bringing it up. The reason it's called Formula One is that there are regulations about how your car can be built. The wheelbase can only be this big, and you have to have these components. That's called a formula, and this is the top one. There's a Formula 2 that's basically like the feeder series that feeds into Formula 1. There's a Formula 3. There's even a Formula 4. And that you climb the ladder as a driver, and eventually you reach Formula 1.
I'm in Formula 75 at the moment. I'm
Yes.
trying to make my way there.
If you are in the US, you have 2 ways to watch full F1 races, ESPN and F1 TV. As far as I know, ESPN only comes in a cable package. There might be some Disney Plus thing. I'm not sure. But if you've got it on cable, you can use your cable login to access the ESPN app, at least on Apple TV. and it's decent there. If you don't already have ESPN, your best bet is F1 TV, which is F1's over-the-top subscription service. There are 2 tiers there. There's the Pro tier at $11 a month or $85 for the year, and allows you to watch every session live and on demand without commercials. If you don't care about watching in a timely manner, the Access tier is cheaper at $3.50 a month or $30 a year. But you do have to wait 2 days to watch the on-demand replays of the sessions. Both tiers also provide access to the historic F1 archive. So if you want to go back and watch the entire 2021 season, which was a banger, you can do that. Sort of sets the stage for a lot of what's happening now. And if you don't feel like watching entire races yet, there's also the official F1 YouTube channel, which provides highlights of every session, with the races being edited down to about 7 minutes each. YouTube is how I usually consume practice sessions. Though I know of many listeners who just watch the YouTube highlights and then listen to our podcast to get the full picture of the race weekend. So it is up to you. Testing begins on Wednesday, February 21st, and will certainly be on F1 TV. Not sure about ESPN. And finally, just want to give a warm welcome to all of the F1 newcomers. I know it can be intimidating to jump into a sport like this, especially one with such a rabid fan base. Some of the more annoying F1 fans can be pretty protective of their hobby, sport, whatever. But racing is for everyone. So we love it. We want more people to be excited about it. Our goal is to keep this show accessible so that more people can learn it too. It's not to say that we dumb things down or anything, but we just try not to assume that people know what an undercut is, for example. So if you have questions, even if you think we've answered them before, don't hesitate to write in at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails, because we love hearing what is difficult to grasp. Makes our job easier knowing what people are having trouble with. And chances are, if you have that question, then others do too. We also have an F1 fantasy league. Yes, there is fantasy sports for Formula One. Once that gets started, you can join using a link in the show notes that we usually attach to every episode. And if you want, you can ask other listeners of Shift F1 questions by joining our Discord channel, which is also newbie friendly. And you can do that via Patreon, Danny.
Yes, we started a Patreon a number of years back. We are very grateful to all of the folks who sign up there, and we try to provide as much cool stuff as possible. Should be mentioned that all three of us, none of us work in the field of motorsports journalism. We all work in different aspects of video game work, I guess. You know, I'm a documentarian, Rob is a journalist, Drew is a developer. So we try and make sure that the Patreon has a bunch of cool stuff there, but it's not an overly exhaustive one. We try and keep the tiers pretty low and make sure that we're consistent and that the quality is good. So there's 3 tiers. There's really 2 tiers, and then there's like a psychopath tier. We'll talk about our psychopaths in a second. For $5 a month, you get access to a monthly bonus podcast. Drew sort of referred to what we do. It's a lot of it is, fun movie reviews about car movies with cars in it. I won't say motorsport movies. We've jumped the shark on that clearly. But also we've been doing this podcast for almost a decade, and we have loads of old episodes as well. You get access if you sign up for $5 a month today. You can listen to dozens of exclusive Patreon.
Danny, by the way, it's March 10th, 2014.
Was the first one.
Was our first episode.
So it is actually going to be 10 years.
Yes.
But it truly wasn't. It's truly not going to be 10 years until it's the first episode Rob came on, because that was when the podcast truly became Shift F1.
Good.
Yeah. If you're into that $5 tier, you also get access to ad-free versions of all of these episodes. So you can just kind of sign up to that RSS feed, and you'll get all the free ones, and you'll get the regular weekly ones with no ads as well, which is pretty cool. Or sorry, all the exclusive ones, and then all the rest of the stuff ad-free. If you're in the $10 tier, you get access to the video version of this podcast. We do record. You can see our visages. You can check out how we look. One of us is a meme, so that's like a fun. You can just sign up and figure that one out. We also have done that for years, so we have years of video podcasts. We also have done some weird video stuff over the years, including taste tests of various F1 drivers' booze. Was there a new one? Did you find a new one, Drew?
Yep. Valtteri Bottas now has his own wine.
Terrific. Great. He's probably naked on the bottle, is he?
I hope so.
Fantastic. Maybe we'll be drinking some of Valtteri's Finnish blood in a future video. And then, of course, we do have our incredible title sponsor tier. If you want to give us, oh my God, Drew you have the Valtteri Bottas calendar?
I sure do.
Wow. If you're watching the video version right now, you could see, and I can see Valtteri Bottas's butt. Valtteri Bottas. There it is. And if you wanted to sign up as the third tier we have, which is our title sponsor, which we put as $50 a month, and we read your name out usually at the top of the episode. And the preseason primaries, we always do it right here at the end, just because we're talking about the Patreon. So much like an F1 car, our podcast is just lathered in sponsors' names, including all of these fine people: Mojo Nixon Gaming, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talkie Autos, Olivia Evans, App Analytics Telemetry Deck TDF1 Team, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Althani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Bunny Fiend, The Snakes, Alex Goucher, Max Faltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Ralph Bury, Lachlan the Madden Man, and Jason Kelly. They're all our incredible title sponsors. Not sure we've that much room left on the car, but if you're interested, you can sign up there.
Fantastic. Well, we made it to the end of another preseason primer, everybody. Danny, final thoughts ahead of this 2024 season.
Oh, it feels like it's happening now. It's not till we do the preseason primer do I feel like it's really going on. It was a weird month of news as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really primed for it. Weirdly, being in Vegas these past few days has also like given me like the F1 giggles a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be a weird season, a transitional season. I think the latter half, when all the drivers start signing contracts, is going to be crazy. Or maybe that stuff will happen earlier. Maybe soon we'll start to get some of that. Exactly. Now that Hamilton's done that, it's all over the place. So yes, very excited to chat to you fine gentlemen every week as well for the next 12 months and then 20 years.
Yeah. Rob, final thoughts.
So Danny just reminded me of my actual theory for why Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes.
Okay.
I think it all starts at the Vegas GP. He's hanging out there in his hotel room, and he's like, man, I just need to get in the Vegas spirit, and he watches Ocean's 11. And then a couple months later, he's like, damn, that was a good movie. I wish there was more. And somebody was like, well, they made a second one of those, right? And he watches Ocean's 12 and realizes he's got to go to Ferrari. Because Italy just looks so cool.
Yeah. That's what it was. And he was like, I was going to join Kickstake, whatever they're called, but that's they're changing to the UK, so I guess I'll have to join Ferrari.
Well, you gave the thumbs up and it pulled the emoji into the camera. Something that my therapist's office had to let everyone know that hey, if you see weird little graphical effects during your therapy session, that's probably Apple.
Yeah, I had that happen during therapy, literally, because I'm on I guess the camera just assumes it's FaceTime, so if I do things, it I don't know what else I have to do to make it do something, but yeah.
Wow, and all this and more on the Patreon. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you guys for joining me. It's going to be a heck of a season. Can't wait to see how it turns out.
Is
that how I end this? How do I end this? No,
never. Usually you do. See you
next.
Oh,
that's right.
Yeah.
Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.